He was a homeless teen, cold, hungry, and invisible to the world, when a lawyer in a black coat walked up to him with words that didn't make sense at first. "You are the heir to a billion-dollar tech company," the man said. The boy laughed, because how could a kid with no shoes and no home own something that rich men in glass towers killed each other to control? For years, Alex had lived on the streets, learning which bridges were safest to sleep under, which trash cans had food that wasn't too spoiled, and which shop owners would let him sit on the curb without calling the police. His childhood had been a blur of shelters and foster homes, each one colder than the last until he stopped counting birthdays altogether. He never knew his parents, only scraps of stories told by foster mothers who wanted him out of the house before he could make trouble. He carried a backpack with nothing but 2 shirts, an old notebook filled with his sketches of gadgets and machines, and a broken phone he used to dream about fixing. That was all he had in the world. He thought he was no one. But on that winter morning, standing outside the corner bakery, a man with gray hair and expensive shoes told him his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. Alex wanted to walk away. People had lied to him before, fake promises of adoption, fake smiles of social workers, fake friends who stole his food. But the man spoke a name Alex had never told anyone, the name written on his birth certificate, and that was when his knees almost gave out. The lawyer explained that his father, a man Alex had never met, had been the founder and CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the world, a man who had died suddenly in a plane crash, leaving behind no wife, no other children, no will, except for one document naming Alex as the rightful heir. The company had assets worth billions, but more importantly, it had power. Power that men in suits wanted, power that could crush competitors and control governments. And now, that power was in the hands of a boy who had slept under cardboard the night before. Alex's head spun. He didn't know if he should run, laugh, or cry. He thought about the other kids at the shelter, kids who never got a second chance, kids who disappeared without anyone remembering their names. Why him? Why now? He looked down at his ripped sneakers and dirty jacket, then up at the man who stared at him like he was holding a golden key. The first days were chaos. One moment Alex was invisible, the next he was headline news. Cameras followed him as if he were a movie star, reporters shouted questions he didn't know how to answer, and men in dark cars followed his every step. They gave him a suit that didn't fit, a mansion that felt like a museum, and food so fancy he barely knew how to use the fork. He couldn't sleep in the giant bed because the silence was too heavy. He lay on the floor instead, like he had done under bridges. He didn't trust any of it. In the boardroom, men twice his age smiled politely but whispered behind his back. Some called him the street rat heir. Others tried to trick him with contracts he didn't understand. They thought he would be easy to push aside, just a kid with no education, no training, no idea how the world worked. What they didn't realize was that living on the streets had taught Alex how to read people better than any business school. He saw greed in their eyes, fear in their posture, and lies in their voices. He knew who wanted to betray him before they even made their move. He stayed quiet, letting them underestimate him, because that was the only advantage he had. Alex began to explore the company his father had built. Endless glass towers, research labs filled with machines that looked like they came from the future, factories where workers wore white coats and carried tablets. He was amazed by what he saw. Artificial intelligence, robotics, programs that could change the world. It was like walking into one of the sketches he had drawn in his notebook back when he had nothing but dreams. He realized, with a sharp ache in his chest, that maybe this was why he always loved building things, even from trash he found in dumpsters. Maybe it was in his blood. But the company was not just about innovation. It was about power struggles. Board members plotted in secret, rivals waited for him to fail, and enemies lurked in every corner. They wanted to take everything from him, to prove that a homeless boy could never lead a billion-dollar empire. But Alex was not as helpless as they thought. He studied every night, staying up until dawn reading his father's old journals, learning about technology, leadership, and the betrayals that had nearly destroyed the company before. He asked questions, not to the executives who tried to trick him, but to the janitors, the engineers, the people no one noticed. They told him the truth, the hidden cracks in the empire, the real problems behind the glossy reports. He listened and learned. Slowly, he began to piece together a picture of the company his father had left him. It was a fortress, but also a battlefield, and he was standing at the center of it, armed only with a sharp mind and the survival instincts of someone who had fought for every meal of his life. The first big test came when the board tried to force him to sell his shares. They brought in lawyers, threatened him with documents, and even leaked lies to the press about his past. They thought he would panic and sign everything away just to escape the pressure. Instead, Alex did something no one expected. He called a press conference, stood on the stage in front of hundreds of flashing cameras, and told the world his story. He didn't hide where he came from. He told them about the shelters, the hunger, the cold nights on the street. He told them about the people who ignored him, the people who bullied him, and the few who showed kindness. He looked into the cameras and said, "I may not know everything about running a company yet, but I know what it means to fight. I know what it means to survive when the world gives you nothing. And I will fight for this company, for the people who built it, and for the future it can create. Because this isn't just about money. It's about a legacy my father left, and I won't let anyone steal it." The room went silent. For the first time, the world stopped laughing at the homeless heir and started listening. From that moment, Alex was no longer just a boy with an inheritance. He became a symbol. People from around the world sent him letters, cheering him on, saying he gave them hope. Young kids who had nothing saw themselves in him. Workers in the company rallied around him, believing he could bring back the vision his father once had. But with admiration came danger. Rivals wanted him destroyed. He received threats, his accounts were hacked, and there were even attempts to hurt him physically. Each time Alex stood taller. He remembered the nights when he had been chased off alleys by gangs, when he had to fight just to keep his backpack. If he had survived that, he could survive anything. But not everything was about battles and enemies. Along the way, Alex began to discover pieces of himself he never knew. He learned about his father's love for innovation, his dream to change the world through technology. He learned about his mother, a woman he never met who had believed he would one day do something great. He found people he could trust, friends who stood by him not because of his money but because of his character. Slowly, the boy who had once thought he was no one began to realize that he was someone. He was not just a homeless kid, not just a billionaire heir. He was both, and that made him stronger than anyone expected. The story of Alex's rise was not easy. There were betrayals, heartbreaks, and moments when he almost gave up. But each challenge only sharpened him, made him more determined. He turned the company around, pushing it into new heights with ideas that came from the notebook he had carried through the streets. He proved that brilliance can come from anywhere, even from a boy who once had nothing but scraps of paper and imagination. And in the end, he didn't just inherit a company. He built a legacy of his own. One that would be remembered not for the money, but for the courage to rise from the lowest place to the very top. Because sometimes the most unlikely person, the boy no one believed in, the kid people ignored, becomes the one who changes everything.